Unfortunately, I do not have a pocket, so I'm just going to have to... Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Westside Unitarian Universalist Church, a place where love unites, caring connects, and community thrives. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Linda Phippen, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. As a member of the worship committee, I will be assisting with today's service. It's good to see all of you here in the sanctuary on this damp Sunday morning. Unfortunately, the rain has given us a little bit of a respite. But if you are watching on YouTube today or sometime in the future, we welcome you to our gathering and hope that you will feel like a part of our community too. At Westside, people come from all sorts of religious backgrounds, orientations, beliefs, and identities, and they will find a warm welcome here and acceptance. If you are here in person, please join us after the service for coffee, tea, and snacks. If you're a visitor or new here, you can find information about Westside in our visitors area towards the back of the sanctuary. Announcements about upcoming events and other important information may be found in your order of service or will have been scrolling on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. If you missed the announcements, you can always find the information on our website, that's westsideuuc.org, or in our newsletter. If you are not subscribing to our newsletter and would like to do so, you can do that on the website too. So now that that's our business part is taken care of, I will turn over to Reverend Carol.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Good to see those of you who are with us virtually. If I haven't met you yet, I'm Reverend Carol Bodeau. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am privileged to serve here as minister. I do want to call your attention to a couple of things just before we really settle in for our gathering this morning. Many of you have been attending our 9:30 a.m. spiritual practices gathering that is becoming a really wonderful experience for those of you who are feeling like being up that early in the morning. We've been having good meditation and movement and just some nice conversations. So I want to invite you to that. And starting the first Sunday in March, we're going to start a spiritual discussion group. We've had some requests for like more conversation time on sort of topics of big questions. So questions like, we're going to be talking about these some in our service in a couple of weeks. Like, where do we come from? Where are we going? What are our big philosophies about life? What do we actually think about the big questions? So first Sunday, starting in March, that'll be after the service ends. And the first few sessions of that, what we're going to be doing, for those of you who are familiar with the Building Your Own Theology format, that's where we share our stories of sort of our journeys of what we believe. Chris shared a little bit last week about his journey that way. And that's where we're going to start in our discussion group, is just, what do you think about the big questions and how did you get to that perspective? Also, just want to give you some heads up about congregational meeting things that are coming up. Save the date. March 24th will be our first congregational meeting. The board and the stewardship team are working on preparing the draft budget for us. So you just might want to save that date in your calendar to try to be here for that. That would be great. So today, I'm going to be inviting the bowl to sound, and we are going to be thinking about a couple of words that I never really thought about the difference between them: praxis and practice. And they're really the difference between engaged behavior and habitual behavior. So what I'm going to invite you to do as the bowl sounds is actually become fully present in this moment. Try to let go of all the things that already happened, that you're thinking about, that happened in the past. Let go of what you got to get to next. See if you can bring yourself right here, right now, just for the next, say, 45 or 50 minutes. It's a thing that we often aren't doing. We're often thinking about what's coming up or what already happened, fretting about the future or worrying about the past. So while the bowl sings to us, I would invite you to just call yourself fully present in this moment, in this room.
So Bridget Ross is going to light our chalice this morning. And she will also light our 2 community candles, one to recognize those who are suffering, wherever they may be in the world, whether it's far away, across town, or down the street. We've also taken to lighting a candle to remember that there's good news and good things happen as well, things large and small every day. One particular act of kindness in a difficult situation that I read about was a bride who recently had to cancel her wedding and the non-refundable $15,000 reception that went along with it. So rather than just bemoaning and writing off the loss or perhaps having a big party for her friends and family, she donated the reception, including a dinner, a DJ, and dancing to special needs families through a group called Parents Helping Parents. So even individual small acts of kindness can really make a difference in other people's lives. So the words for the chalice lighting come from Crystal Hogan from the UUA Worship Web and are entitled, "We Carry Our Faith into Action." We ignite this flame, symbol of our faith, to beckon us into community, to warm our hearts with love, and give us a light to follow as we carry our faith into action.
So I'm going to invite the choir to come up. Maybe you all can stand kind of up in the front there. We're going to be singing Building a New Way. Now, those of you who feel like joining in, you don't necessarily need the words. You can kind of hum, you can clap, whatever. The idea is it's meant to be a little bit fun and bouncy. So you can feel like just kind of joining us with a little bit of your voice while we sing. So that one took some praxis and some practice. So, as many of you surely know, this week is Valentine's Day, right? It is Wednesday. This is the day that people set aside to focus on love, which I stopped to think about, and it struck me as a little strange that we need a day to remind ourselves to think about love. And I relish holidays. I want any excuse to celebrate, and I kind of just usually take them all in stride and think, yay, we get to celebrate whatever it is, Pie Day, Jello Day, Wet Dog Day, whatever the thing is that we're celebrating, right? And that kind of makes more sense for things that are like just happen once a year, like birthdays or anniversaries, right? It makes sense to say today is the day that we celebrate that. But it's a little bit more complicated on some of the other things that maybe we take for granted, like we have coming up in the spring and early summer, Mother's Day and Father's Day. And I mean, it's a good thing that we choose to set aside days to honor those, but it also seems like maybe we do that because we're taking them for granted the other 364 days of the year, which probably isn't such a great thing. So, love. Why is it that we actually need to set aside a day to remind ourselves that love is an integral part of our lives? Is it something that we take for granted? Now, the truth is, I think we probably do. We probably take for granted the simple day-to-day forms of love because we're so busy prioritizing the big peak moments, right? All you have to do is look at the advertisements for this time of year, and you see that it's big peak moments that get the most attention. There are some wonderful new marketing campaigns that celebrate smaller things, but often when we think of Valentine's Day, we think of big gestures. But how often do we pause to notice and really acknowledge and appreciate the simple versions of, yes, love that happen in our day-to-day lives? A simple smile from someone that we know, the way a family member might pat our shoulder, a text message from a friend. Or, something that I really love living out in the country, that we do out in the country all the time, is we wave at each other as we drive past, right? We wave. There's a certain radius, a certain distance from the farm where the wave happens, right? You wave. It doesn't matter if you know them or not. Car passes you, you say hello. Often we take for granted just how much love we need, how much love we're already receiving, and how much we have to give. It seems to me that in communities like ours, those small gestures are fairly common. We kind of make a habit of those here. That's why we say more explicitly in our new slogan that you're hearing more and more, love unites us and caring connects us so our community thrives. But here's a bigger question for us. What does it mean that the General Assembly of our denomination, the Unitarian Universalist Association, is going to make the final vote in a few months to make love the explicit task, the task of our denomination? Surely it doesn't mean we're going to be expected to make big, flowery, grand gestures to each other, or to come, on Sundays with luxurious gifts of jewelry and chocolate, because I know the chocolate frequently shows up, right, as does the coffee. But that's not really what it means. So what does it mean to say, as our newly drafted statement of purpose does, that the whole point of Unitarian Universalism is, and this is a quote, to actively engage its members in the transformation of the world through liberating love? That's like a whole different version of Valentine's Day, right? That's like really big. That's a huge thing. What exactly is liberating love as distinct from other kinds of love? And how do we even contemplate living into that big of a, literally, they're asking us to transform the world. That's a really big request. What does this mean? So to try to get a handle on this, the first place I was looking was a branch of Unitarian Universalism, one of our offices that you can Google and research, and it's called Side with Love. Okay? So it's one of the main social justice divisions of our movement. They have an action center that offers resources and trainings and other events to help us get engaged in this kind of transformative love, right? And what that really boils down to, in its most basic form, it means acting for justice and equity in the world, because caring for all things and all people is what we want to do. Does that sound like a huge order to anyone else besides me? Okay, what does that even mean? All right. Well, Side with Love is currently engaged in their annual 30 Days of Love program, which it takes the whole month of Valentine's Day and says, let's figure out how we can spread love, not just for a day, but for a month, right? And really they work all year, which is designed to help us kind of expand this idea of being loving to something bigger than just February 14th. Now, if you look at a little deeper into our denominational structure, if you just, if you were to type into your browser Unitarian Universalist Association, and you called up their webpage, you would see 4 main tabs, worship, and one of them is called Justice and Inclusion, okay? And under that header, you're going to find actual practical things, projects, ways to engage that are supposed to help us embody a kind of care for the world. Under the header, you're going to find all sorts of things that you can learn about and get involved in, including something called UU the Vote, which is about mobilizing people in our congregations and communities to actually get out and vote and be educated about the things that match our values. There's congregational justice programs. If you click on that, you're going to get to Side with Love and different programs that congregations can engage in. You're going to find resources on disability and accessibility, climate and environmental justice, which includes the Green Sanctuary program that we're participating in, things about economic justice, immigration, international justice. How many of you knew that the Unitarian Universalist Association has an office at the UN? We have an office at the UN. We actually do. There's LGBTQ plus welcome and equity, which includes the Welcoming Congregation program, which we are part of and renew every year, anti-racism and multiculturalism, and the very specific Mosaic program, which is focused on particularly dismantling racism and oppression. There are resources on reproductive justice, and if you go a little bit deeper in, you're going to find information about the way at our General Assemblies we come up with public statements that we make publicly as a denomination, and actions of social witness, statements and actions that we collectively agree to take as a denomination. There is a lot of information there. It can be overwhelming. Right? One of the problems we face as Unitarian Universalists is we have this sense that the world needs us and needs a lot, and then we get overwhelmed because we feel like we can't possibly do all that. And this is where praxis and practice come in. So I'm going to define those two terms. This was really helpful to me, actually, thinking about this more deeply, because I've sort of thrown those terms around, but not really thought deeply about the difference between them. So I did a little reading and thinking about that. They are sometimes used interchangeably, but they do mean different things. So practice, it's the one we use most often. Practice means material actions that are usually repeated to make something happen. Right? Praxis, it's not just a word that's used to make you sound intellectual and elevated, okay? Praxis actually means understanding how to apply theory in the world. Praxis can result in practices, but they're not the same. So praxis involves a deeper level of thinking and analysis, while practice kind of focuses on repetition and improvement of a skill or a behavior. Praxis emphasizes the importance of putting our theories and our values into action and testing them, and rethinking them in real-world situations. Thinking about how we're acting to live out what we know, and then rethinking to engage in practices that match our values. So for example, let's think of something we do regularly here at Westside that we started doing for a good reason. Potlucks. Okay? You can imagine, I wasn't there when the potluck thing started, but I can certainly imagine that it started for a very good reason, to bring people together, to make connections possible. That was a praxis. Let's think about how we can live our values. We want to connect, let's do this. And over time, it became a practice that we did almost without thinking about it, right? Potlucks are what we do. Matter of fact, when we stopped doing them, during COVID, that was tough. That was the first thing people wanted to get back to, was the practice of having potlucks. But since then, we've been rethinking, like, how do we do potlucks? Here are some kinds of new information or new theories that might have to be considered if we engage in praxis around our potluck practice. So, for example, we've had to think about, and we still kind of need to think about, which is a better energy use. Wash the ceramic dishes or use compostable dishes? There are pros and cons to both. Which is better? Now, we've pretty much stopped using plastic flatware, but what else might we be doing that's contributing to plastic pollution? What kinds of containers are we buying? Are they recyclable? What about those little stir sticks? Are we still using those little stir sticks, right? And what about the sources of the ingredients for our shared food? This is a really good example of where practice and praxis don't come together. So one summer, a few years ago here at Westside, we spent an entire month talking about sustainable food and our food choices and how that affects the earth. And for that month's potluck, I said to everyone, I'm going to be like a top-down minister for 1 month, and I'm going to say, please bring only locally or sustainably grown food to the potluck. And for 1 month, everybody did it. And the next month, we promptly went back to our practice of bringing whatever we wanted to bring without necessarily thinking about it being sustainable. So praxis is saying, what are our values? How are we living them or not living them? And practice is often habit. And frequently, habit, because it's familiar and comfortable, will often take the place of the challenging work of engaging in praxis. So another really good example of this that I didn't write down, but that's really clear, is where I'm standing. Okay, our practice for a very, very long time was that lectern was right there, just where Linda's sitting here. The lectern was where the minister and the worship associate stood behind it, and the chalice was in the center, and the chairs were behind the lectern. And we would come forward, and this is an old practice. Some of us were just talking this morning about the way the sanctuary is actually designed, right? It's got steps, so we're up here, right? So those are practices. Ministers stand behind lecterns. Well, a while ago we said, what's our praxis around that? What do we believe? What do we value? Well, we value community. We don't want to have this idea of a hierarchy of, I'm up here and you're down there because I know more, right? So we started sitting differently. We tried a new practice as a way of praxis. And then, in the way that praxis goes, it's an experiment that you try out and you feel it out. So you'll notice it's different today. Because some people have said, well, we can't see you when it's crowded. And it's weird to come in to sit down. If you're the last person in the room, it's weird to come in and sit down. I guarantee you this configuration will not necessarily be here in another 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 5 months. Because praxis means adapting and changing and trying things out and learning and experimenting. So today's version of praxis is, I'm up here just so you can hear me. Linda and I are up here so you can hear us and see us more easily. But the chalice is there in the center. The chairs aren't facing each other, but they're tilted. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like. Okay? Praxis is when we step back and really think about how we can apply what we know and believe. It's really thinking about and acting on our values and our deeper understandings, which hopefully are evolving and changing and growing, right? Hopefully, we are constantly receiving new information, new understanding, evolving in our willingness to grow and learn. That's different than habit and habitual practice. They hopefully overlap more often than not, right? Practices are hard enough to maintain. How many of us feel like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to get to the potluck. I'm trying to get to church regularly. I got to go to the gym. I should really call my sister. I really want to meditate. All the practices we tell ourselves that we want to keep going. That's hard enough. Throw in praxis. That's even harder. Because whereas practice means doing something habitual and repetitive the same way time and again, praxis means replacing often familiar patterns, which probably started for a perfectly good reason and were perfectly appropriate when they started. It means replacing them with new ways, evolving, changing. That can be challenging. So living into that call to engage in the transformation of the world through liberating love, that's a big request. It requires some learning and some understanding and thinking and praxis, but it doesn't have to mean going out and solving every problem on the planet. Praxis doesn't have to mean big gestures. It can mean simply making our day-to-day habits and practices more in line with our values. Little things like, how do we sit when we're in this room? How do we rearrange things that actually match our values? What am I going to bring to potluck? Am I going to take time to smile and really listen to someone else? The simple day-to-day practices are where we most live out the praxis, the lived presence of our values. Practices are repetitive. Praxis is not. Praxis is always evolving, always growing, and always changing. So I want you to take a minute right now, if you'd be willing, and just ask yourself, what are my habitual practices? What do I do in my day-to-day life that's habitual, that started for a perfectly good reason? Are there any of my practices that I might think about from the angle of praxis? Now, this doesn't mean that we can do all the things we'd want to do, right? I have a high value for sustainable living, and yet I drive 45 minutes, about 30 miles each way every time I come into town. I have some issues with that as far as praxis goes, right? I have mixed feelings about that. We're not going to be able to do everything we want to do. We can't necessarily fully live the values we wish we could. Not everyone can afford locally grown sustainable food, right? There are things that we want to live our values in that may not be possible for us for any number of reasons. But perhaps there are ways you can. Some suggestions for this week with Valentine's Day. If you're going to buy chocolate, buy certified slave-free chocolate. Don't just go buy the cheapest chocolate on the shelf. It's a little thing, but it's a big thing to say that I'm going to support those chocolate makers that are not using child slave labor to produce their chocolate. Maybe if you're going to buy strawberries this week because they're cool and they're red and everybody loves them for Valentine's Day, think about where they were sourced and how they were grown. Perhaps if you want to give a gift to a loved one, you can make a donation to something that supports your values rather than feeling, oh, I should buy something for Valentine's Day. I'll just go buy a thing that then contributes to an economy that is harmful to people and the earth. Every one of us every day engages in practices. It's how we function. We get up in the morning, we make coffee or tea, we eat breakfast, we go do activities, we have rituals and habits. We can't necessarily have every single moment of our lives be constantly thinking about all the things we should do, but we can challenge ourselves a little bit. Maybe pick one thing to think about more deeply. Challenge yourself this week, perhaps, to think about the way you can say, I love you in praxis. See if you can try out one or two new things that allows you to love in a way that is liberating. I hope that we as a community can support and encourage each other. When someone says, well, you know, I don't know about that seating arrangement, Carol. I'm not really sure about that. I love it. I hate it. Here's what works for me. Here doesn't. It doesn't. Right? Praxis is saying, oh, tell me more. Tell me more about that. Let's think about that. What do we value? How can we live into it? So I encourage you to try that out in your own life, and please weigh in during coffee hour about the arrangement of the sanctuary, because we're not yet decided on that front. So some of the ways that we engage in praxis and practice is we try to make justice and generosity a part of who we are as a community. There are lots and lots of different practices that we do, some of which have changed in recent years. So, for example, our practice used to be to take a collection every week. We would pass around a plate, right? We would pass around a plate during the offering. That's a traditional church practice. We have changed that because of praxis. We said to ourselves, well, one, lots of people don't carry cash anymore, so that's kind of embarrassing, right? When you pass a plate around and people feel weird not putting money in the plate for all kinds of reasons, right? So that's a very public kind of like, how much money are you giving? So as a praxis, we said, let's respect people's privacy around that. Let's find a different way to do it. Now, you can use a QR code. You can put your cash or check in the donation box in the back of the room. That was something we changed. We have a lot of other programs and projects that we do, try to do justice work and liberating love in the world. So we used to practice family promise by having people in the building. With reflection, we realized that that wasn't something we could continue to do. Now we support that program in different ways, by supporting them financially, by assisting other congregations. But there are many evolving ways you can support the good work of the congregation. So I want you to think about things that you might want to participate in that are giving love, financially, energy, time. But you also might think about the praxis of receiving love. This is a little trickier. What are your habits around receiving care, concern, and transformation? There are opportunities for that here as well. I was describing some of the spiritual practices, the discussion groups. I also got a message from the Wednesday evening group after we had our service last week with stories. Chris was telling his story. The Wednesday evening group checked in with me and said, hey, we didn't know you were going to do the story thing, but we just started doing stories too. So they are now using a model of sharing, not necessarily personal stories, but using stories of people as a way to discuss deeper topics. So I would encourage you, if you want to think a little more deeply about things in the world, that's another opportunity you might engage in. You might engage in some of our adult religious exploration programs. And one of the other ways that we try to share loving kindness and care in the world is through sharing our joys and concerns. So Linda's gonna be checking the chat on YouTube, and we're gonna take a few moments here to share joys and concerns that are with us in our lives, in our world. And I'm gonna start with a couple. I'll go down here. I'm gonna start with a couple that we wanna light candles for. So many of you know that Judy Burgett has been in a care facility after a medical crisis related to some of her medical treatments. And we want to wish her a happy birthday and also a happy Valentine's Day, because today's her birthday. So even if she's not watching this, even if she never sees a recording, we are going to sing happy birthday to Judy today. All right? So would you join me with that? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Judy. thank you all. And there's a card for Judy that, you've got it, right? Judy Winchester has it. If you haven't signed it yet, you can sign it at Valentine's card, and there's also a birthday card.
And there's a birthday card on the back.
Okay, there's a birthday card and there's a Valentine's card, and they're both going to get delivered to her. I also want to light a candle. Many of you who've been here a little bit longer will remember Lois Calhoun. Lois and her husband Bill were founders of this congregation. Bill passed a few years ago. Lois is declining. So I just wanted to let the congregation know that if you want to reach out to Lois, if you know her and you want to reach out and call her, she'd be happy to hear from you. She might not necessarily remember you, but I've spoken with her sons, and they said that they're sure that she would be happy to just, receive some encouraging calls. So any of you who know Lois and want to reach out to her, that would be great. And her sons appreciate just knowing that Westside is thinking of them and sending love and care their way. So if you have a joy or concern that you'd like to share, please come forward and just say your name and tell us what's in your heart, and I'll light a candle.
So, Judy Winchester, I had something happen last evening that put an unusual glow of love in my heart. It just really stood out. So, this is my story, okay? So my daughter, Christine, and her husband, David, live in the Philadelphia area, and they were invited to be guests on a radio program, on the public radio program, that's on once a week, about folk music in the area. They are both singer-songwriters, and in that way they were invited to be guests on this show. So the part about it that made my heart glow is that when the couple that are the hosts for the show introduced them, they described them as they invited them for this Valentine show because they were the most loving couple they knew. Wow. Yeah.
That's awesome. Bet they learned that somewhere, Judy. That's awesome. Okay, other joys and concerns.
Hi, I'm Mary Frances, and this may be a minute, so I'm going, this is deep cut here. I've had custody of my kids since 2010. It's not a secret. I'm not their biological parent. Their biological parents are my dad and his wife/ex-wife. And I've been in constant litigation since 2010 with them over custody. And it wears my soul quite a bit. I walk around every day with a big hurt that my dad would rather take me to court than just acknowledge I raised his biological kids with love. Anyway, so it was quiet for a while, and I got served to go to court a few weeks ago. And I'll say this, it's really horrible to know your dad's suing you. Anyway, so March 1st, I'm doing family court, and I just need all the love I can. Hopefully my case gets dismissed. But it's a big hurt that I walk around with, and I try really hard not to let my kids feel any of it. So just positive energy would really be appreciated. So thank you.
I'm Jerry, and that's Alice, of course. And we just this past week celebrated the 9th birthday of our one and only grandchild, Fox, who a few of you know since he was a little baby. And of course, they are living in the Netherlands now because our son Robert is in the Air Force and assigned to NATO right now. And we're planning to go visit in April, so we're looking forward to that. And Robert was in Australia this last week on business. And as far as we hope we made it home safely because we haven't heard yet. But happy birthday to Fox.
Happy birthday to Fox. Awesome.
I'm Suzanne, and as people been around a while know, I usually am celebrating things. This is a candle of concern. A longtime friend of mine, who I hope will be here for our wedding. She is planning to, and she is, in fact, the person I've said, yeah, you're being the mother of the bride, because she tells me all the stuff I should do. And I go, no, I don't want to do that. Yes, you're going to do that. This is my friend Mita. Is in the hospital recovering from lung cancer surgery. And supposedly margins are okay, but she has a lot of health problems. And I'm just hurting for her. I hope you'll get to meet her, because she's memorable.
Hey, I'm Helen, they, them, or anything said with love. My great joy is that my little boy Henry turned 8 on Friday and had the best birthday ever, according to him. And it's big sad because we just moved back home a couple weeks ago because I'm getting divorced. Because my soon-to-be former spouse turned out to be an incredibly unkind person. And I didn't know that until after we were married. But I'm very glad to be home, and I'm very glad to be with you all.
Good to have you back.
Yeah, glad to. All right, I'm going to light one more candle. For those joys and concerns that are with us in our hearts. Do we have any more online? Do we have any, Linda? No? Okay. So just for those things that remain unspoken but are with us in our hearts, the simplest acts of love can be the most powerful. A hug, a kind word, letting someone else lose it and not losing it with them, and sometimes losing it with them. Just showing up. And showing up can be a small gesture or a big gesture. Whatever is right for us in any given moment can still be a big transformative act. So I'm going to invite you, as our time of service comes to a close, to consider this new practice that we've been engaging in. We've been engaging in this practice of holding hands. It's okay. Music is good. Sound is good. That's all good. So I invite you to rise, embody your spirit. Maybe dance a little bit with that sound, right? We have a practice of holding hands. If you want to, you don't have to. You can do this, you can whatever. Now, praxis is, you might have to actually, like, can I squeeze into this one, guys? Can I get in this circle? It's a little circle. So let's think of an example of praxis with this. Praxis with this would be saying, okay, I keep doing the hand holding when I don't really want to, because it's what everybody else is doing. You might have a praxis that says, it is my value not to. Next time I'm going to be brave and try not to. You can do that. Or your practice might be that while you're holding hands, to look at other people. We have a habitual way of not looking at each other in our society. And the practice of meeting other people's eyes can be transformative. May you go into this week into this week that is focused on love, knowing that the love that you are is enough. Knowing that the simplest gestures can be the most transformative in the world, and challenging yourself to let that be even a little bit bigger. Go in peace, go in passion, and go with love.